So, you're very welcome, everybody. I think all the doors, there's a couple of doors left open for latecomers to come. I'm Clare Cooper from MMM, and I'm going to attempt to race us through a conversation about one of, I think, the most important and complex concepts around at the moment, and one that I'm sure we would all agree will be essential in enabling us to deliver our visions and our missions into the future. And race is the operative word. I've been briefed to be exceptionally brief, as we only have 60 minutes, and we want to ensure that you have plenty of time to share your views. So, Making the Arts More Resilient is the title of this session. It feels a little bit too directive to me, as if it's a goal that does not need critiquing. So I'm going to suggest that even in the very short time available to us, we shine a bit more of a bright light on the concept and see whether it has a dark side that we need to be a bit more aware of. And to set up that critique, and before I turn to our panel to lead off our conversation, Shrila Ghosh, Director of the Free Word Centre, Tony Nwachukwu, Music Producer, Clare Reddington, Director of the iShed and Pervasive Media Studio at Watershed, and Martin Sutherland, Chief Executive of the Royal and Derngate Theatres, Northampton. I just wanted to say three things. So first of all, origins and definitions. Now, the general meaning of resilience with regard to social systems, derived from its Latin roots to adapt and bounce back, is the capacity to absorb and recover from hazardous events. First used as a policy concept in the 60s and 70s by child psychologists, ecologists, and systems thinkers, in the noughties it mainstreamed into policy speak across sectors with very many different interpretations and contested definitions as a result. Now, MMM started using it in 2007 as an evolution from our use of the word sustainability, which we felt was becoming too associated, in our sector at least, with maintaining the status quo and single, long-standing institutions, and less about the bigger context of the role creative and cultural activity has in our communities. The way we describe it is thus, after the authors of a book I love called Getting to Maybe. Resilience is the capacity to experience massive change and yet still maintain the integrity of the original. Resilience isn't about balancing change and stability. It isn't about reaching an equilibrium state. Rather, it's about how massive change and stability paradoxically work together. Mark Robinson, who arguably mainstreamed the concept into our world of the arts in the UK with his paper Making Adaptive Resilience Real, defines it thus. Adaptive resilience is the capacity to remain productive and true to core purpose and identity, whilst absorbing disturbance and adapting with integrity in response to changing circumstances. Try and say that really fast. So, second point, critiquing resilience as the strategy in the face of crisis and or uncertainty. And I notice that a few folk are beginning to do this. The urban planner, Noah Rayford, asks, do we want organisations that are resilient, i.e. that will be able to bend and flex in the face of stress and then return back to their current form? Perhaps. But what exactly is its current form, and isn't this changing all the time? And what if the current form of our governments and organisations are dysfunctional and maladaptive? Is it desirable to hope for some kind of stability in the face of massive change? Or do we want systems which are durable, i.e. resistant to large amounts of pressure and stress, doing their best to maintain their current structure and relationships? Isn't this perhaps what we have already, a system resistant to change? Or finally, do we want a system which is agile, i.e. it can actually change and transform itself in new ways when facing times of stress, like a gymnast, ultimately morphing into some entirely new balance of tension and force? Isn't this perhaps the most desirable metaphor to use? Doesn't this take into account the evolutionary, indeed co-evolutionary nature of the world? The architect Indy Johar proposes a new combination word for all the above, duragibilient. Vinay Gupta argues that we need to go beyond resilience. His view is that there are two responses to crisis: restore things to pre-crisis conditions using resilience models, or implement revolutionary change. Right now, what he's not seeing in the dialogues about resilience that he's been exposed to is a clear discourse about resilience as an alternative to revolutionary change. He wants to see a discourse about knowing when to make systems resilient and when to prime them for revolution. So my final point, what are we being resilient for? This is a big mission question, I know, but the reason I ask it is because I think it's very important to keep our individual and collective missions at the forefront of our minds all the time as we think about how we're going to develop our resilience or our duragibillience. MMM has a very clear vision about this, which you can find out about by going onto our website and looking at our plans for a rethink. And as our network continues to think and learn and do, we're finding that we want to add 2 other R words to our lexicon, relevance and responsibility. And you can read more about our 3 Rs in our proposals with Era 21 for a re-evolution, also on our website. So now I'm going to turn to our panel and ask each of them in 3 minutes to touch on 2 things. What kinds of resilience have you observed individually, organisational and sectorially working in the arts? Have you seen any examples of organisations that are resilient despite the fact that they might be considered to be maladaptive and dysfunctional, what I call defensive resilience? And how would you describe the best qualities of resilience you have witnessed or experienced in your own organisations? And have you got ideas of how these can be built on quickly and effectively? And I'm going to start with Clare Reddington. Way back in 2005, when Watershed was an MMM exemplar, you were finding that the actually very resilient charity company limited by guarantee model wasn't enabling you to build the kind of financial resilience you were seeking at that time. Do you want to tell us a bit about the resilience journey you've been on?
Yeah, certainly. Excuse me, 3 minutes means I'm going to read so that I don't waffle. Regis made it very clear that we weren't allowed to waffle, not in quite so polite terms. So, as Claire said, Watershed was the UK's first media centre, so it began life over 25 years ago and concentrated mainly then on the exhibition of independent film. Like many arts organisations, it had 2 companies. It had a charitable trust for its arts activities, and it had a trading arm for the conferencing and events and bars. But in the last 15 years, Watershed became much more than a cinema. Its cutting-edge R&D projects, which brought together artists with companies like HP Labs, started to cause a stir. This is pre-creative economy, and we were finding that our funders and the Charities Commission weren't exactly thanking us for the work that we were doing in this area. Questions were raised around purpose, responsibility, and what was appropriate for an arts organisation. So in 2007, seeking to create a position for ourselves that didn't upset our funders, but also gave us a more proactive position in this landscape, we set up iShed as a wholly owned subsidiary, a community interest company, but a vehicle which was able to turn a profit, take investment, and work in partnership with whoever we would like. Creating iShed was transformational in Watershed's ability to produce new work and support early stage ideas. By 2009, we'd opened the Pervasive Media Studio, a physical collaboration space which gave a home to all of our activities in this area. But as each part of the business gained more profile and more momentum, it became clear that we were starting to damage the whole. Our audience couldn't make sense of the breadth of activity we were offering, and even we were having trouble articulating our own story clearly. So we began thinking again about our structure, and now, after some very long, hard thinking about what we are, how we work, where we deliver value, we refer to ourselves as a cross-art form producer, sharing, developing, and showcasing cultural ideas and talents. We're still a group of 3 companies, but we operate within a common brand values. We share resources. Projects flow between us more freely and more naturally. We make use of expertise wherever it sits in the organisation, rather than creating new company silos. For me, one of the most fundamental and exciting parts of this new joined-up approach and shared interest is a focus on visitor experience, whether that's online or offline. We ensure everyone who interacts with us is offered great value, gains a coherent understanding of our offer, and has the ability to engage. These changes to company structure and thinking were not made to change or shift our purpose, but I do think the process has helped us understand what we are. They were a response to a changing world. The consumer market is becoming more competitive. People are pushing harder for value in everything they do. Digital tools have made engagement and distribution easy. We live in trying economic times. To stay relevant, to make money, and to continue to produce exemplary cultural experiences, we need to address our total experience. A joined-up experience is not in the foreground of many organisations' thinking. but you can't have static, fractured structures in a fluid world. Resilience to me is about being able to continually add value, to have a meaningful and lasting impact on our communities. And to do this, we need to develop as they develop. We need to remain agile and open to new possibilities, new ways to operate, regardless of where they come from.
Claire, thank you. So Shrila, how would you describe the best qualities of resilience that you've witnessed?
Thank you, Claire. I'm Shrila Ghosh and I'm Director of the Free Word Centre, and I will talk to you a little bit about how 8 organisations in the literature sector came together to create Free Word. I've seen some good examples of resilience in all my 25 years in the arts. I think the important thing that's different from then to now is actually a sense of sectoral responsibility. I think that really has changed, and I think I read somewhere, it's asking the bigger than self questions. So I almost start by saying that a resilient organisation is obviously looking hard and asking hard questions of itself and of its mission and purpose. It's also asking, in that sort of famous Kitchener thing, ask not what you're, it's Kennedy, wasn't it? What can I do for you should be a question. Nick Serrator, yes. Yes, all knowledge. So I think it's about being alert. Resilience is, an organisation that is a resilient organisation is alert and has an understanding of the big picture. And when I talk about the big picture, I'm not actually talking about just the arts and cultural sector. I don't think that in this morning's session we really got a sense of how what we do matters in a sort of global planetary sense. So that's the kind of big picture that I think we really need to think about. And that means recognising the importance of interdependence, of how what somebody else does impacts on us. And we see that. You just turn on the news and you know that what's happened as a result of globalisation is something that happens in Tunisia, affects Cairo, affects us ultimately. Fostering collaboration. It's a very odd paradox that I've discovered, but it is actually the more you give, the more you can get. It is a simple thing to explain to people that the reason you collaborate is, sure, you have something. It's like trade. It's like understanding what it is that you've got to give and what you want to get. And the more you give, the more you invest in the process, the more you will get from it. And my last 4th point is about sharing expertise in a structured, peer learning way. So, we know that the end of modernism, the end of history in 89 or whatever, that top-down model thing doesn't work, but it's how we share and learn from each other. That's also very important. So, resilience is about being relevant and it's about taking sectoral responsibility. And that's not actually about the size of the organisation. Peter Aspden has written one of the provocation papers for this conference, and in it he cites some examples, some good examples of, say, for example, how the National is working. At a recent conference we heard how the Young Vic and several other theatres are coming together. It really isn't about size. A small organisation can be a leader. So just to very briefly, in the probably a minute that I've got left, to tell you very quickly the Free Word story. Free Word, as I say, is an alliance of organisations from across the literature sector. The literature sector, as we know, is tiny. The publishing industry is huge. It's the largest in the world, the UK's publishing industry. But within that, the subsidised literature sector is absolutely tiny. And within that, within a tiny sector, what you've got is kind of symptoms of the opposite of resilience, really weaknesses, that everybody is kind of divided, and it's a very atomised sector. So it was very necessary to bring things together and to create a home for the word. And I think the critical thing about Free Word, and again joining up to the big agenda thing, is that Free Word is not simply about literature, it's about literature and freedom of expression. So it's connecting with a much wider range of ideas, and that has given us the strength and the resilience, because the freedom of expression organisations, I mean, the literature organisations you'll be familiar with, they're Apples and Snakes and R1 and so on, but the freedom of expression organisations, Index on Censorship, Article 19 and so forth, who are in the building, that is what helped us to unlock the £6 million of capital from the Norwegian Foundation Fritt Ord, which bought the building called Free Word Centre. So, by joining up with others who you may not necessarily have thought of before, you might be able to tap into whole new areas of support, and that's certainly our experience at Free Word. Our mission is also important because Free Word's mission is not only to promote literature literacy and free expression, but it's also to enhance the work of the sector, and that's why I go back to, that is our purpose, that is what we are there to do. To give you an example of interdependence, it's a complete understanding that reading and writing, I know it sounds so simple, are intrinsically linked. So, we've got the reading agency, and you'll be able to hear from Miranda McKerney later this afternoon when she talks about the big society and how we fit into that. So how the work of a literacy organisation that's really pioneering, like the reading agency, feeds into the work of an organisation like English Pen that is there to support writers. We understand that, and we try to do, joined up. I really haven't got time to go through all of the sort of examples that I've got, but I just want to say that everything that we do when we get together as 9 CEOs, and we get together monthly, it is that forum about the sharing knowledge and expertise. Everything we do is very purposeful because we haven't got the time to waste, and that's a very important part, I think, of this conversation today, is that yes, trust takes time. We have to be generous with each other and what we know, but if you know why you're coming together and what it is that you have to do, that's obviously a great starting point. Have I got one more minute? Okay, wait. 30 seconds. I heard something very good earlier this week. Some of you will know the Van Abbe Museum, which is in Eindhoven, and Charles Escher said there that what we need to think of ourselves as is experts without expertise. That really made me think, because the model of the 20th century was about developing expertise, and that's what led to that kind of silo mentality. It's having the confidence to go beyond your expertise. It's a combination of the knowledge that will help to create the transformative measures that we need to take to deal with what's coming. And finally, my final point is about the fact that I think a lot of the things that the new world requires are things that women are particularly good at. So in terms of the kind of leadership of the sector, and I don't mean that in a sort of men can't do it way, but I just mean that the sort of the sharing, the generosity, the long range thing. Females have always looked at long range because I think we're mothers. So I think the feminisation of the workplace is something else to take into account. And I want to leave you with this thought from an Argentine writer called Alberto Manguel, who spoke at Free Word recently. When asked by the audience one question, what has literature ever done for us? He answered, well, a book does not give you the answers. The best that you can hope from a book is that it will teach you to ask better questions.
Thank you very much, Srila. Tony, there's a theme coming through here already, and I know when we spoke before the conference, you two had quite a lot to say about mission. What's most important for you in these questions?
Yeah, well, first of all, my name's Tony Wachiku. It says here that I'm a music producer, which is actually quite powerful for me because, in the last 10 years, I think I've done so many different things, including become a gardener, avid gardener. But beside that, I'm a music producer and educator. I also I'm a director of a company called Burnt Progress, a music-focused creative agency and community. We create projects that help people connect, share, and learn and profit from their work in the widest possible context. I'm sure you're aware there's been vast changes in the music industry landscape over the years. Despite the continual change, the complaining, format evolutions, lawsuits, restructures of companies, one thing is clear: the music is clear. Music is still heard, music is still debated, music is still created, and above all, music is still consumed. Music is at its core. So for creative businesses that have invested more than 10,000 hours, and I include us not in the conversation, arts organisations and producers in this conversation, a serious rethink is required. First of all, do we still want to get involved? You know, after years we've invested in time and effort that we've created, making these organisations, putting on this work, is it worth it anymore? Do we still have a connection to the work that we make? Is it still relevant today? And do we still have the drive and ambition after all the sweat and toil, all the panic, all the kind of rejigging? If the answer is yes to these, then I think you should consider that there is no quick fix at all. It's actually quite exciting there's no quick fix. To me, we have to all rethink what the arts is. The arts is commodities, assets, resources, snapshots of history that have both a public and commercial possibilities. They have a connection to income. They have a return on investment. And more importantly, the work needs to be spelt out. You need to be proud of the work that you make and broadcast it as best you can. We have to rethink what audiences are. They are both consumers and supporters of art that we produce. And to me, we also have to rethink the workforce. To me, the relationship's no longer around a regular, having staff that are regularly paid, and freelancers that are on this 10-week project contract. I think there's a lot more to be said about the value and the relationships that have come from the workforces that we work with. So in all this, to me, it's about mission. And to me, arts organisations have become mission-focused, content-producing resources that work with audiences to produce, deliver, document, and distribute high-quality, scalable work consistently. And to me, the word is consistent. It's not about whether or not you've got project funding to make something happen. It's about making it happen. At the end of the day, art is happening with or without us. The question is how we want to get involved.
Thank you very much, Tony. So Martin, Royal and Derngate is well recognised as a resilient organisation. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, I would broadly agree with what you said earlier on about this session being, perhaps the title of the session being a little bit too directive, because I'm not aware of any arts organisation whose central ambition is to be resilient. We're far more sexy than that as a sector. I'd also recognise that resilience as a concept is problematic, or can be problematic, because it rather presumes that no matter how much disturbance a resilient organisation faces, it will always re-emerge refreshed and ready for more. For me, a resilient organisation is one that has a clear vision, underpinned by externally facing values, and whose vision is implemented by a team of nurtured, creative and ambitious people. It's also one that inspires its audiences. In the last 3 years at Royal and Derngate, we have taken action that others have described as being resilient, and that we behave as an organisation who has a resilient organisation, which I guess is why I'm here today. Our vision at Royal and Derngate is to be a national, regional and local centre for creativity, entertainment and innovation. And we deliver our vision by responding to opportunities. And of course, the scale and the extent to which we can deliver is dependent on resourcing, but our vision is not the result of cuts, anticipated or otherwise, or any other external changes. Our actions, though, are responsive to the wider impact of changes affecting our society. I'd like to suggest that a resilient organisation is not one that simply deals with what is dished out, but is one that has preempted disturbance, helped to orchestrate and agitate positive change, and which now chooses how it evolves. And in the last 18 months at Royal and Derngate, the senior management team, we've developed a new company, an independent charitable trust, separate to the trust that did operate the building in Northampton. And we now provide not-for-profit management services to the theatre in Northampton, Royal and Derngate, and also a new charity operating another new theatre in Corby, which is 20 miles away from Northampton. And this opportunity to develop this new structure emerged at a time when we recognised the need for us to be more porous as an organisation, being a building from which our expertise and activity could flow, but also, more crucially, that we were more receptive to external influences, locally and nationally, artistically, and also how we run our business. During this period, we've also engaged in a more meaningful way with our local authorities, sitting on local strategic partnerships, the regeneration committees, town centre management, planning committees, and I'm not wearing it today, but I proudly carry a county ambassador badge. We recognised that we need to be directly contributing to conversations about the direction of our town and our county, and we were welcomed into those conversations. These two actions, the new company and closer engagement with our local authorities, were aligned to our central vision, which perhaps makes us more resilient, in the way that many of our colleagues are. So I'd like to cite a few more practical examples of organisations that I think are demonstrating resilient behaviour. And you could consider the new partnership between Shared Experience and Oxford Playhouse, or Unlimited Theatre and West Yorkshire Playhouse, and also the refocused activities of the Arc in Stockton and the diversification of the activity at Dada and Derby. I can only sort of speak about Unlimited and Oxford Playhouse because I sit on the board of both those organisations, but I've long admired the other organisations since it's clear that the actions that they're taking are firmly rooted in their vision. None of the developments that these organisations have undertaken are a result of cuts or anticipated cuts. None are reaction to disturbances. All are born from clear and distinct visions. For me, for Roland Derngate to continue to be resilient, it's not a case of adapt or die, more of a case of for us to adapt too much, we will die. Organisations that adapt their actions but not their visions will be those that thrive beyond these difficult times.
Great, thank you so much. I'm already trying to make some themes for later on, but there are too many, but I'll have a bash by the end. So we now want to open up to you, and if possible, with so many people in the room, it would be great if we tried to have a conversation rather than a kind of question and answer batting backwards and forwards to the panel. So could you please wait for the microphone to come, stick up your hand, wait for the microphone to come, please give us your name and organisation before asking a question or making a point. And please note this is being audio and video recorded, so it's crucial that all comments are made into the microphone. I know that there are many fine intellects in this room who will have some great insights. So who wants to start off? Diane, thank you.
Diane Ragsdale. A question, I guess. Is it worthwhile to consider that a resilient arts community or a resilient arts sector might be different than the sum total of a bunch of resilient arts organizations, and that the first idea might require creative destruction occasionally? And is that terrible to consider?
Let me take two or three, and then we'll try and come back in a group. Morris.
Morris Davis Museums Association. Actually, it's on a similar theme, but thinking more about individual organisations. I was just intrigued that in the discussion of resilience, nobody seemed to talk about perhaps making their organisations smaller. It was all really models of achievement, and there's still this growth paradigm. So it's a little bit like the same. I mean, should the sector get smaller? Should individual organisations get smaller?
Sally Taylor from LCASE. This is specifically to you, Srila, because I know you have a very good view on it. Your organisation came together not as a straight collaborative partnership. 8 organisations were put together in the same building. It was your remit to make it work. There have been other attempts at doing this the other way around, which is we need to have a business model which will bring all these organisations together. There are some very key examples where that has failed. I'm just very interested in your view on both of those.
Okay, we'll take one more and then we'll ask the panel to come back. And indeed anybody else who wants to be responsive to those points.
Hello, Tim Baker, Baker Richards. Very struck that everybody on the panel was talking about cooperation. I'm seeing increasing moves towards, or a need for consolidation. And this is around the issue of small organisations, that small organisations just can't reach critical mass in so many areas. And the models that you're describing about the 8 organisations working together in literature, or the Derngate providing back office services to other theatres, seems to me a really crucial model going forwards. If the organisations are going to survive, they can just become much more efficient.
Who wants to start off? Claire.
I think absolutely there's a time to die, and not many of us kind of take that into account or understand it, and that we think about a resilient ecology as being something which is good for us. A lot of the work that I do, I can't quite work out what the benefit will be for us, and that doesn't really matter, because if it makes the ecology stronger, then eventually that will be good. There will be a benefit to us for it. And I think definitely the Pervasive Media Studio was set up with that this is technology, it will keep moving, and absolutely we should aim to kill it off in 3 or 4 years. But I think that also the mix of sizes, types of organisations within that ecology is really key as well. The responsibility for the small, the responsibility for us to enable small to be beautiful, for small to flourish, for us as institutions to take on some of that care away from the people who can't write funding applications, don't have cash flow, would like just a word of support or somewhere to live for a little bit, I think is really key within keeping our networks diverse and interesting and disruptive. And that means that we can be resilient institutions, but make sure that new ideas and new ways of thinking are always added into the mix.
Any other comments?
I mean, certainly I would agree that and I think I said it as well, in terms of our developments, the organisation, as long as we are honest to our vision, it can be scaled up, scaled down, frozen according to what resources are available. So I don't actually necessarily think that the actions need to necessarily be about growth. And in the case of Rolling, Derngate and Corby Cube, it was about sharing services, but actually the way we deliver our vision is scaled up according to what's available to us. So I'd agree that the size isn't everything in this case.
I would echo that, to just come in on the question that Maurice asked. I think that's absolutely right, but I think we're at the beginning of the cycle of getting our heads around, the fact that we don't need to continue to. Technology plays a big part in this. I mean, across all other sectors, as things, are developed, as other solutions are found, the sort of jobs that people used to do don't exist anymore. And as a group of 8-9 companies and our 20 associates that I didn't have a chance to mention before, we're looking at exactly that, of actually trading people moving from one organisation to another, or people working for several organisations and that kind of thing. And I think, Claire, through MMM, the Newcastle Gateshead project is a very good example of that, of actually busting through that growth paradigm. To answer Sally's question, I found myself on a panel not so long ago with Sunita Alain, who is the chair of Sound and Music, which has a different story from the free word journey. And so Sunita talked about the marriage of these organisations to form this kind of unified whole. And as I was coming immediately after her, it sort of struck me that what Freeword is a bit like a big shared student house. We cohabit, we are not merged, we are not married. And I think that's quite important, but it is a complex kind of dynamic to understand. A sort of the merger model is painful in some cases, but simpler. And it's still quite a sort of, paradigm of the 20th century, where I think that thing about a kind of fluid and an open system, because any of my organisations, if I call them that, could leave at any time. And it's also really interesting for me that there are 2 organisations in that partnership who are not actually physically benefiting by being in the building. They don't have their offices in the building, but somehow the vision is strong enough to keep them. The buy-in is there. And I think as leaders, again, this is my kind of recurrent theme, is how do you manage that peer learning network, and how do you lead without being a heroic leader? How can you lead? How can you be generous? How can you be a host-type leader, as Margaret Wheatley says? I think those are really important questions.
Can I
Yes.
just say, coming in from Twitter, because for a conference that is encouraging a hashtag, there's rather little interaction. But Rick Hall says, resilience and size reminds me a hamster will survive being chucked out of a plane, but an elephant will perish.
Very good. Just before I come to you, sir, I want to just throw another couple of questions for those of you who are looking for some other hooks to come in on. Some of you, I'd love to hear, should we prioritise resilience in different aspects of our work, financial, artistic and organisational? And also, what do you think the impact of greater resilience will be on the vision and mission of those working in the arts in 5 years' time? And maybe that might start to answer Diane's question. So not wanting to throw you off course. The microphone's coming.
Yeah, you have thrown me off course completely, actually.
Oh, sorry.
Robert Powell from Beam. We're an arts and architecture and learning organisation, quite small, based in Yorkshire. Two things, really, not answering your question. One is I'm really interested in the idea of of sectoral responsibility, which one of you mentioned. And I think the time is right for that. I think that's really in the zeitgeist now. And I think that the experiment just beginning to do with the Turning Point network about the visual arts in this country, nurtured by Arts Council, but actually, aiming to set a new balance between a whole sector and the Arts Council. I think it's a very interesting experiment, and I do encourage you all to have a look at it, because I think it's important, because I think we'll learn, I think it will be painful. My question for all of you is, you're being a little bit nice in a way, because I think to have successful partnerships and collaboration, you do need to recognize competition, because competition is part of vision to some extent and part of sustainability. So I'd really be interested in knowing your experience about how you recognize competition but kind of deal with it for the greater good. But it's all sounding a little bit too nice to me.
Can I? Yeah, I like that. I run this project called CDR, and the premise with CDR is that producers, people make music, whether you're an established producer or kind of a bedroom producer, you bring your track down to this night, and then I play it, and it can be any quality. The idea is about tonight it's about the idea, about music, about sharing a work in progress. So on one premise, you have producers who come down, hear their track, and an A&R man might come along and go, "That's a great track, I want to license it," or sign you or whatever. On another premise, the track might actually be not my taste. It might not be that good. But it happens. The night happens. Networks are created. Conversations are created. Bands are created. Projects are created. So what's been really interesting for me is that I went through this phase of all these kind of artists coming to the night, getting signed, going on to bigger labels. And yes, part of me feels I should have had a stake in there, whether I had their publishing or whether I had managed them or something. But then part of me looked at it from a different perspective. Actually, the fact that I've created this opportunity, I can use that to my advantage. So it's a bit like I use that experience, the fact that an artist has gone on to sign to a bigger label or gone on to a management company as part of my kind of portfolio, which I can then use to present when I go and talk to brands or go talk to organisations about the kind of work that I do. So to answer your question, I think it's a lot about rather than looking at competition, look at it from a slightly different perspective. I think for me, again, this idea that music's happening anyway, art is happening anyway without us. I think the position is where you sit in that ecosystem. And I look at more and more as organisations being facilitators, kind of being that kind of gel, that hub, you make it happen with all your experiences.
Okay, we've got 3 hands shooting up there. I'm going to go with Anupam first, Rick, and then the lady here. So come back with the 3 points, and then we'll take them.
Anupam Ganguly from the Arts Council. My question was around the non-subsidised sector. There are lots of organisations in the non-subsidised sector. A lot of them have very clear missions. They are sustainable, they're resilient, they're innovative. They're all doing very good work. What can you learn from the non-subsidised sector? Are you talking to them? Are you reinventing the wheel? Because I think that there is a missed trick there if you aren't talking to the non-subsidised sector. Okay.
Next point.
Rick Hall from Ignite, with the comment about the hamster coming out of the plane. The other thing about the conference is we're talking about creative thinking, and one of the characteristics of creative thinkers is resilience. The work of Guy Claxton, for example, points to that. And what he understands by that is a capacity to tolerate confusion or to be comfortable with ambiguity. And so as we are in circumstances that are rapidly changing, I think we do have to be kind of fleet of foot, open to new possibilities, doing our own research into other opportunities, other links, other networks, other sectors. And therefore we can become fleet of foot, if you like, and so on.
or sleight of whatever it was. It
Sleight
was a
of
brilliant one this morning, wasn't it? It's just coming.
Hello, my name's Jane Bryant and I'm Chief Executive of Artswork. I just wanted to share with you some very early work we're doing around collaboration. Artswork has delivered 105 work placements in organisations in the East Midlands and the South East through its Future Jobs Fund programme. Indeed, one of them is the Derngate, the Cube at Corby. But I wanted us to do better by the young people. The Future Jobs Fund programme, great, but it takes young people for 6 months, gives them a job, and then sends them out again. And I thought there must be a better way of delivering a sustainable approach. And we are in the very early stages of pulling together training providers and cultural and creative industries and learning agencies in a particular part of the Southeast region to create a collaboration of work employers and to produce a much better outcome for young people. So we have a growing network of cultural and creative industries, FE, HE, and learning agencies. And we've received together to this partnership funding of £50,000 from the Learning and Skills Improvement Service, because they are interested in innovation and in innovative ways of approaching the apprenticeship programme, of approaching workforce development, and of approaching entry-level points into the cultural and creative industries. Now, we're at the very early stages of this work, but I just wanted to share that that is focused on a particular outcome, which is about young people and young people at risk particularly, but how you can achieve more through partnership and collaboration than any one single organisation could do by itself. And we've been able to lever in investment already, not because we're one organisation, but because we're a collaboration of partners and looking to strategic planning over a 3 to 5 year period. As I say, early stages, but I'm very happy to share how we're progressing, because I think it's quite an interesting model, but it's obviously not unique. There'll be other models.
I'm picking up this gentleman's point. Did you have issues of competition in setting that collaboration up? And indeed, has anybody else successfully managed those? And we'll come back to the panel on that.
Shall I just answer that? I mean, we're at such early stages, but what the approach we're trying to say is this is not about organisations doing everything together. It's about respecting the individual missions of those organisations, but it is looking beyond that to what can we do together that no organisation could do separately, and that's the essence.
So shared vision is the first step. Can we come back to the panel for a minute, and then we'll go back?
Yes, I just wanted to pick up your point about we've all been a bit too polite. And I'm going to bring in a couple of other P words because, you know, in my experience, and one of the things I most enjoy in life is partnerships, which is why I've spent, you know, so much time doing that kind of work. Partnerships are not really made between institutions. Partnerships are made by people, between 2 or 3 people, whatever numbers of people, because, you know, that's the key is when 2 people click, that they want to work together, the motivation is there. In the scenario that Sally described, the free word thing was created. Yes, the organisations, it is a bottom-up organisation meeting the sector's needs because the sector decided to put it together, but it required a lot of skillful chairing and steering. And one of the things that I heard this morning, which I actually agree with very much, was actually Liz Vaughan saying that, you know, with the further cuts that are coming to the Arts Council, one of the things that we really have to be very careful of is that we don't lose the kind of expert leadership that does exist. So looking at it as a sector overall, there is no way that however visionary and, you know, driven these small organisations were, there was some very skillful work done by the Arts Council to put that collaboration together. And it is not, I'm not sitting here pretending that everything is really rosy back in the kitchen, because, you know, there are still a lot of issues to work through. But one of the first things I did on coming into this setup was to get to know the people, because unless you understand the people, you don't understand the motivations, and you don't know how you're going to make it work. So building trust is the first step, really.
Claire?
I wanted to pick up on the competition and niceness, and it's something that Katie Bill and Dave Reacher picked up on Twitter. It's sort of competition to what end? For audiences? Probably not. A kind of an audience that goes to all of our work is a better, more engaged audience. But saying that, we don't collaborate with people like us. It's better for us to collaborate with people who aren't like us, because competition always comes into it. We know what we bring, we know where our value lies, but unfortunately as a sector, I think because we're all looking up at our funders all of the time, we're always in competition, and we need to stop looking up our funders, stop that parent-child relationship, and look to our audiences, and then maybe we can get over the kind of competitiveness and learn to properly collaborate.
Gentleman at the
Agree
back.
entirely.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then I'm going to come back to you again about this. What do you think the impact of greater resilience will be on the vision and mission after this gentleman's spoken?
Hello, I'm Peter Seddon. I'm a member of the Regional Arts Board of the Arts Council, but I'm also an artist. And I was thinking about a comment earlier that someone made about the resilience that artists have in relation to their practice. And my mind is swimming full of slogans at the moment, including the ones here. But it makes me think of Gramsci, you know, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. There's something that's very resilient for us to remember. And we should remember that this isn't the first time we've been in this difficult situation. I'd like to paraphrase an old Fenian saying, the economy's difficulty is art's opportunity, with all the kind of resonances that might have. My experience of last time round in the early 1980s, living and working in Glasgow, was with young art students at the art school then. And they were extremely resilient because they knew there wasn't much future for them. And it was out of that kind of difficulty that the opportunities arose, and it was run by and established by the artists themselves, producing collectives, realizing that it wasn't just a factor of making art, but the practice was also involved with the distribution of it, the dissemination of it, and the locality of it. Out of that came the Transmission Gallery, which many people would have heard of, which now has an international reputation. So, yes, we do face difficulty, but there are reasons for optimism as well. And I do take the point that art will be made whether it's funded or not.
Anybody feel like casting forward? We've only got about 7 minutes left now. Casting forward and imagining what the arts world will be like if we manage to build our resilience in the next 5 years.
So I just want to pick up the competition thing one last time, actually. For us, it's probably a moment of honesty, really. We constantly wrestle with the notion that we have to be commercially competitive, because actually 17% of our turnover is subsidy. The rest of it is ticket sales and bars. So actually we are competitive with our neighbouring theatres for our audiences. So we've got that to balance off against the fact that we absolutely see our responsibility as the main organisation in our county to share our resources and our expertise. So it's a constant juggling of that, really. So I don't necessarily think and it's not something we've yet found a way to be comfortable with. It's just the reality of running a business which relies on commercial income and a mix of subsidy.
Maura.
Casting forward. My kind of response to, I think, what I've heard on the platform is that one of the things that seems to sort of bring everybody together is this sense of the stable organisation at the heart. And one of the things that you've been working on and Era 21 have been working on is the notion of financial resilience and what that means in relation to building up an asset base. And I'd be interested to hear how, as organisations, obviously to innovate and to bring in new products that you can work with and explore is one part of that. But physically, what assets would you like to see your organisations build up to provide you with financial resilience into the future?
Brilliant. Lady at the back.
Right, my name is Norma Darby, and I'm a teacher. I'm the person amongst so many of my other colleagues who are providing the audiences for the future, for the resilience of the arts in general. I teach in a comprehensive school 25 miles from London, and 90% of our students, without being forced to, choose to take an arts subject. However, the government has introduced the English Baccalaureate. Now, in fact, we do quite well. Nationally, 15% of people, students last year ended up with the English Baccalaureate. 43% did in our school, because, of course, encouraging the arts encourages curiosity, encourages an interest in humanities, gets people wanting to learn languages, etc., etc. But I just wonder if, I know that what is happening, because I went to the arts conference quite recently, people are frightened because the arts are still seen, unfortunately, as a luxury in education in many, many circles. What are all of you, and I include myself in this, doing to make sure that we still are developing the audiences of the future through contacts with schools? I know how many arts organisations come into school. I'm in touch with them every week. But we're going to have to do still more, because there is far less and less stress from government on developing the arts in schools.
Okay, I'm going to take another point from the floor here. Oh, and two more there, and then we're going to come back to the panel, and we may be running out of time.
I'm Maria from Salisbury International Arts Festival. Actually, it picks up on that lady's point very much, which is how we as a sector choose the cards that we're dealt, rather than allowing them to be dealt to us. And a question that came up this morning that wasn't answered in the end, which is, how will cultural policy be linked to educational policy over this next period of 3 to 5 years? So what would it look like if we, as a sector, led that? We actually stepped into the middle of that and helped to lead that with some of our amazing leaders that we have. Could we change that and make it what we'd like it to be?
Great point. Down here at the front, and then we'll come back to the panel.
Looking ahead, Maureen Salmon, looking ahead, I'd like to pick up on the comments that's been made. It's about that Shrida talked about, it's people who make partnerships and not organisation. And it answers the question of when asked about what assets have we got, and the greatest asset we have in the sector are people.
Mm-hmm.
People will survive over and beyond organisations. They come and they go, and we always have people. And so we need to kind of seek out, and picking up on the point that was made about people not like ourselves, that as we look forward, we need to kind of look around the room and say, have we got too many of the people who are like ourselves in here as we talk about, resilience and moving forward, and who else do we need to have in the space as we move forward?
Lucy Perman from Clean Break. I'm really struck by the sectoral responsibility comments that have been made, and also the point that somebody made about consolidation and achieving critical mass, because the reality is, in this climate, there are lots of very small organisations that can't effectively compete for contracts and can't achieve critical mass in terms of audiences and make the case, make the numbers case. And my fear, just to be negative about casting forward, is that the future ecology is one where the small organisations will fall off, they'll die, they won't survive, and that we'll all suffer as a result of that. It will be a dull ecology, in my view, and we'll lose the expertise and the innovation of small organisations that are obviously that are occupying small niche markets, and that will be a loss for all of us, and that's a real concern of mine.
Some final comments back from our panellists.
I want to be very optimistic and pick up on Lucy's point. I think the point that I've been trying to make throughout this session is actually big or small, and particularly big organisations, because they've got the capacity, have to recognise their responsibility to the sector as a whole. And you're absolutely right, like every other kind of sector of the industry, the innovation often comes from the grassroots, from the new, from the fleet of foot, etc. And it's the responsibility of the organisations, of the national organisations, be they museums, theatres, whatever, to pick up and nurture. And I would say that something like, for example, the National Theatre working with Punch Drunk, for example, is an example. So that just should run through all conversations about what we can do for others, and that's the way to survive. On the asset question, Maureen has really said it, that I think one of the best things that MMM has done in its 5 years is to open up that conversation about the reserves, about how we manage, ourselves how, having that open conversation with funders, and, it's not such a contentious issue anymore. We are encouraged to create and, develop reserves, which is our capital for future investment and new ideas and so on. So that's now much better understood. But ultimately, I think the asset base of every organisation is its people, because without the ideas, there's no point in having an organisation.
Tony,
Yes.
any last thoughts?
Sorry? Relevance for me. I think a lot of the time, for me, getting to your, what you're talking about being relevant to school children, I think at the end of the day, a lot has to be said about creating art that's relevant to young people. I think we're living in an age of MTV, social media, YouTube clips, hit rates. I think there's something around that. I think there's something around hit rates that we know nothing about. Cats that fight printers, there's something about that. There is, children laughing, biting fingers, there's something about that. There's an audience for that. I think it's about rethinking what audience is and rethinking relevance.
It's sort of just an observation at the end, just which does still trouble me, this notion of big and small, and that all the partnerships we're talking about seem to be about larger organisations supporting smaller organisations, and it's really reflect on the parental suggestion about the funder and organisational relationship as well. I think we've still got to wrestle as a sector and as an organisation about our responsibility as a big organisation, but not to forget the need to try and introduce a better level of parity in those relationships. We haven't sort of sorted that yet.
Claire.
I think I'm excited, and the words opportunistic, alert are exciting to me, but responsibility is not just to a sector, it's to ourselves, and it's to our staff and our organisations. And I know how wearing and exhausting always being opportunistic, always being agile, always looking for the new thing can be. So I think we have to learn, and I don't know what the answer to this, how to take care of ourselves whilst always remaining open and flexible to whatever comes around the corner.
Well, great. Well, I was so charged with keeping time. I hope I've done well. There's just a couple of things I wanted to say to finish up with. I mean, there were a lot of themes coming through there, and I'm sure the people who are doing the write-up of this will get this much better than me. But I loved Tony's preparation, if you like. We've got to rethink what the arts is. We need to rethink who the audiences are, and we need to rethink the workforce. I absolutely love that. There obviously were a set of key requirements coming through as well, that with this need to be mission-focused. Some of the comments that were being made about letting go of static structures, and this key word, certainly for MMM, which I'm delighted has come up so often, is relevance. And recognising the assets that we already have. And any of you who have not read our Capital Matters report, I urge you to go and do that. And indeed, our work on 21st century competencies also absolutely underlines that whole issue of one of our greatest assets is our people. And actually, the fact that many of us are resilient already. We've been working on sweat equity, as Adrian Ellis so beautifully introduced to us all those years ago, for donkey's years, and no doubt we'll be requiring to do that much more. And then there are these set of key competencies, qualities and attributes that we will need to develop our resilience. And it's really interesting to me to see this theme of collaboration and partnership and interdependence coming through so strongly this morning. And if you have not gone and looked at MMM's work on collaboration on our website, there are 6 case studies of groups around Scotland and the northeast of England who have been collaborating and continue to collaborate. And some of their stories have been very hard. The issue of competition is completely unresolved with the 5 national performing companies in Scotland. So there's lots of dark sides of collaboration coming through those stories, which I hope will be of help to you as well. Thank you. Oh, that was a funny noise. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening and contributing so well. I'm now required to tell you that the next session is lunch, which is located in the Thames Room on conference level +1, 1 floor up from the ballroom. And thank you very much.